Hey guys, this is Market Update. There's really one piece of data we have to look at right now, which is this, the typical Bitcoin halving cycle. So in autumn and winter of this year, if you look at previous cycles, is typically when Bitcoin will break out of its all-time high and then go to its new all-time high, the price discovery mode, right? It's a bull market. We're knocking at the door. What is going to be the shoe to drop? It's not a technical analysis thing right now, right? 58K, 56K, 61K. The big move is like from here to like 120K, right? That requires a change in the mindset of the market. At the moment, it's hand-to-hand combat, right? Kind of choppy trade. People that have faith here buying, and people that just are saying, I'll take some profits. There has to be something that happens. I don't know what that is. I don't think the market knows what it is either. China's stimulating. Europe, inflation is way below target. They need to have mass stimulus there. The US, inflation is still a little bit high, right? They can't really do too much right now. Is it the election? What is going to happen, right? Where that shoe drops and the market eventually says, and you have a critical mass of people that say, this thing's going way higher. And that's when you get that price movement. That's when you get the next stage. Attention back, FOMO in, you get the new all-time high. That's a typical bull cycle, right? I think that's going to happen. I don't know what the shoe to drop is. I don't think anyone else does. But there's so much anticipation in the market, almost desperation right here from people because they can see it coming. They don't quite know what it is. Again, patience is required. It's not about technical analysis right now. It is about actually having faith that the trade that you've put on is going to work, which is stimulus from governments is required. That's going to happen faster and slower. It seems like they're going to have to turn the taps on. How are they going to do that? You've seen that bonds, right? Longer term bonds in the US are starting to sell off. And that means that the market is starting to think ever more debt must have to be issued over time. And so the longer term outlook for bonds is a higher interest rate because what is the interest rate? It's the government spending money, creating credit. And if they can't pay it off through tax revenue, then they have to pay a higher rate, right? A lower credit rating. That could potentially mean that the central bank has to come in and perform yield curve control, right, which is huge money printing as well. It's all of these things are on the horizon. We're just not quite there right now, right? That critical mass isn't there for this market, but you either have faith that that's going to play out or not at this point, and that's where the choppy trade comes from. But we're in the zone right now where something could happen. And we could either drop 50% as well because some piece of news comes out and then the money printing starts or anything else. But you're in the trade because you know that currency is going to get hit at some point, right? And so you're in now and you're waiting for that next move. But we're in the zone right now. Doesn't look like it's going to happen until after the election, whatever. But something's going to drop, something's going to go, and I think we're going to get that new all-time high because, to be fair, Bitcoin's still only like $1 trillion. It can easily grow much larger, right? Gold has added multiples of Bitcoin's market cap this year in nominal dollar terms, right? So Bitcoin's still small. And so even though you're looking at things thinking, well, it's 15K and it goes to 150K, like a 10X, it's getting so big now. But you either have faith that it is going to actually grow into that and then just take gold, or you don't, right? You're either in it or you're out of this trade. If you don't trade crypto on Bybit yet, check the link below. You can get up to a $30,000 deposit bonus if you trade on here. If you can't trade on Bybit, check out Apex, which is like a decentralized Bybit. Just link your wallet and you can trade on there. Right now, you can trade futures and spot on there as well. It's pretty decent. You can check it out via the link down in the description. We are seeing some potentially positive signs. We had that big sell-off month here, right, in the recovery. So we had the recovery month, and then after that, maybe you get a small sell-off as well. But as long as we print a higher low here, it is, it's a sign that the market is really willing to trade at this price. And I just think it's going to be super volatile around the next few months. However, if you look at how Bitcoin usually performs, right, it's pretty positive. We've had these 2 months which Bitcoin usually underperforms in, and then the next, October, November, December, this is how Bitcoin usually performs. These are big months, right? Typically the biggest 2 months. That's why it's called October. I think just patience is required here because what we're seeing, right, is that the typical Bitcoin cycle, all of this data shows us that the next 12 months is usually very, very, very positive for BTC. And if it's positive for BTC, it's going to be pretty positive for the rest of crypto. So that's why people are excited. I think patience is required. And we know the trade here, and we're just waiting for that thing to happen, right? And so I think there's going to be a lot of volatility around this because the more that people come back into the market and start making their trades, that's when volatility increases. Be prepared for some sell-offs, right? Some negative months, but with that volatility usually comes pretty positive months as well. And Bitcoin, I think, still has a long way to go. Gold has added multiples of Bitcoin's market cap this year in nominal dollar terms. And that is a old, very slow moving asset, right? Now you've got Bitcoin, which is only around $1 trillion in market cap. So this thing is still going to be very, very volatile, but that's why we're in it, right? Because the downside equals upside volatility as well as this thing is getting adopted. So it's a really pivotal time that we're in. I think we just got to be patient here and see through this volatility, because everything's telling us that this is the time we need to be in it. The US markets are really in charge of the Bitcoin price right now. And you can see this from the ETF flows. You can see a really big correlation here between positive ETF flows and the price of Bitcoin going up. And then when you get negative flows, we start to get this kind of downward movement, get some positive flows again, negative flows. You can see there's a really high correlation here. And that means we have to focus on the US. And there's just a lot of upheaval and uncertainty right now. You've got an election coming up. People are, very uncertain about who's going to win. Then the policy is massively different between them. Economic policy, specifically towards crypto and Bitcoin, everything could change, right? And so I've seen it so many times where the market is uncertain and it becomes weak because people just don't know how to price things. And then when you get the news event and the certainty, even if on the surface that news event is bad news or not as good as people wanted or whatever, the market still bids up the price of things because it has certainty now. And that means you know what policy is, you know what you think is going to happen, and you can start pricing assets the way that you want. I've seen it many times that when the news actually comes out, you start to get this repricing. Right. And so it's very noisy. No one really knows what's going to happen. And the policy is wildly different, which is why I think that you can't really price things until after you're sure what's going to happen. But you can see the ETFs are in control of the price. And that means everything that's happening in the US right now is in control of the price. So it's important. You can also see here that essentially Bitcoin flows with global liquidity. If you just take global liquidity as an indicator of risk on and risk off, right? Bitcoin is a risk-on asset because Bitcoin is money. And so when people are risk-on and people are producing productivity and producing wealth, Bitcoin does well because people want to store that excess wealth in BTC. And during recessions, when everyone's risk-off, you sell your savings for the things that you need during that time when you get a bit risk-off, right? That is what we're seeing here, risk-on and risk-off. That's essentially what this is. And we're going into what central banks want, risk on again, because they've been drawing us down for so long. You're seeing inflation rates in Europe like way below target. China, they think everything is way below target. Just the US, again, some uncertainty here. People don't know how to price it. People don't know how to, that policy is going to change things. They control the world with the dollar. So it's important, right? The market's uncertain, but something is going to happen in the next 6 months or so where you get that policy, people know what's going to happen, and maybe you can get that liquidity really pumping again, risk on again. And so that potentially is a bull market, right, for BTC, that new all-time high. For right now, it's not going to happen, right? People don't want to do it right now. You're not going to get a critical mass of people right now doing that. But that could happen over the next few months, 6 months or so. Global liquidity is rising again. Central banks are starting to turn on the spigots again. And you have to be in BTC around that time. No matter who wins this election, it actually doesn't matter because the federal deficit is going to continue at pace. And that is because simply the government is spending way more money than it has. And that's not going to change no matter who's in charge. And so it means that dollar holders are going to have to pay for this. They're going to have to pay for the deficits. It's the only way because the deficits are in dollars. The government is in a deficit. They're not going to cut spending. And so dollar holders have to pay for this through currency debasement. It's the only way to keep this show on the road. The federal deficit is now equivalent to 6.4% of US GDP. Now, I asked AI, how big is that? The government deficit is one of the biggest contributors to GDP as any sector. Agriculture, 1 to 2%. Construction, 5 to 7%. Imagine taking one of these sectors completely out of the economy. Imagine taking construction out of the economy. What would happen to GDP? What would happen to employment, right? The market would crash. It would say, what is going on? This is a huge recession. Well, now imagine trying to balance the budget and taking this federal deficit away. What would happen? GDP would go down, be under target, there'd be unemployment. Okay, so they don't want that. So this federal deficit must continue because otherwise you'll get a drop in GDP. That means a drop in tax receipts, everything else. That is not allowed to happen. Without this deficit, we would be negative GDP and much higher unemployment right now. So when you think of it like that, what we're really saying is the government has complete control over where GDP is and where employment is, because they can spend, they can take away, right? So it's important to understand that this deficit, when people say a recession is coming, well, a recession without this spending is 100% inevitable. They can't let that happen. They won't let that happen. Have to have GDP coming positive and employment as high as possible. And so this will continue no matter who's in charge. This is the Bitcoin trade. This is where I'm Bitcoin. Look at this. If you start paying off this debt and taking it out in some other way, you are going to cause a huge drop in GDP. And so it can't happen. That is the recession. So the question is not if a recession will happen. The question is, do you think that the central bank and the government are going to allow a massive recession and actually take themselves out of the market? I don't think so. And so currency will still be debased. That's the Bitcoin trade. And it's going to happen faster and slower at some points. I think we're going into one of those points where it happens a bit faster because they need to try and pay off this debt a little bit. They're not going to do it by not spending. They're going to do it by the other side, which is printing currency and making dollar holders pay for some of this. You and me if we have dollars, but also other countries as well. I will be updating the Crypto Investor course this autumn. It's going to be after the election, so we know what the policy is and we know how that's going to affect Bitcoin and crypto. Check the link below if you haven't got it yet. If you do have it, it's going to be free for you, so no issues. 30,000 deposit bonus on Bybit as well down below. I'm James, this is MoneyZG. Cheers for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.